Yep.
Okay. Hi, Suzanne. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. How are you?
Okay. Yeah, very good, thanks. Calling from not so sunny South London at the moment. Where are you?
I'm in Largs on the west coast of Scotland. It's not so sunny here either, but it's not raining, so that's good.
Okay. Well, makes a change.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So I've just got some questions that I'm going to ask you about your use of Snapchat. But just before we get into that, the first question really is just to set a little bit of context. So my first question is to just ask you, what's your job title and what do you actually do in your job?
Okay,
Okay.
so I'm a teaching fellow in prosthetics and orthotics at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, and that's
Okay.
within the biomedical engineering faculty. So my day-to-day job is teaching and educating students in prosthetics and orthotics. I focus on the orthotics side of things. So we
Right.
do a lot of practical hands-on work with our students where we have professional patients coming in and the students will assess them, take casts of them and manufacture prostheses or orthoses for the patients. And
Okay.
also there's lots of teaching involved in that, just classroom setting as well as practical classes.
Okay. So it's quite a lot of when you're with your students,
Yeah,
so you're actually you're doing kind of hands-on type of things, would you say? Like
very
when you're
much so.
actually.
There's a mixture of lecture-based activities, but also a very heavy element of hands-on practical activities within the course. Yeah,
Okay. All right. Sounds interesting.
yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's get into sort of more the questions about what we're talking about. So my first one is really, why did you actually start using Snapchat? What's the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, well, I had attempted to engage with the students using the university VLE, using forums, but I was literally getting zero traffic, no interaction with students at all, and I wanted to know why that was, so I asked them, and basically there's too many steps involved for the students to interact on the university VLE using forums. They're used to communicating with one click of a button. In order to access the VLE, they've got to log on to the university website, find the class code, class module, and then find the forum within that. And that was just too many steps for them to interact and engage with communicating in that way.
Okay. All
So
right. So
I basically,
just
sorry.
it was a lot easier then for them. Just I suppose they were very familiar with it and they were using it
Mhm.
anyway with their friends and
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think the important thing, and I would encourage other people, if they're thinking about using different types of social media with your students, is to speak to them and ask where are they and where do they want to communicate with you. And that's what I did. I said to my students, where would you like me to communicate with you? And they said Snapchat. I had a Snapchat account, but I didn't really use it. I'd used it once or twice for taking pictures, as you do, making yourself look younger with bunny rabbit ears on. But I hadn't used it in any other way. So it was very new to me.
Okay, so that's interesting that it was actually new to you, so you had
Mhm.
to kind of learn how to use it as well.
Yeah, and the students actually really enjoyed that aspect of it because the first class that I used it with were very involved in setting up the chat group. They basically stood beside me. There was a couple of students who basically walked me through it. They set up the chat group and we set up
Okay, so the students became the teachers.
very much so, yeah. And I
Right.
think that helped as well to get buy-in from them because they were involved from the offset. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So once you started using it, how did you actually use it with your students? Because I presume you were. Well, I don't know. Can you explain how you actually used it with your students?
Yeah. Um, So I envisaged using it our students have a really quite full timetable. They're in classes pretty much 9 till 5 every day apart from a Wednesday afternoon. So there's not a lot of downtime where the students can interact with you, perhaps to ask you questions. So I wanted to be able to facilitate a way that they could communicate with me if they had any questions that they needed clarification on out with class times.
Right.
So the first time that I used it, so they'd set me up with the Snapchat group, and the first time that I used it was literally 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. It was a spinal orthotics module I was teaching at the time.
A spinal
So
what?
a spinal orthotics module. So I teach
Okay.
the students about scoliosis,
Right. Okay.
and I sent out an X-ray of a scoliosis, of a patient with scoliosis, and asked them a question about it. And I didn't think much of it. I didn't expect to get much response because it was 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, but within 5-10 minutes I had 6 or 7 responses with the students telling me what they could see in the x-ray. And for me, that highlighted the fact that they can access Snapchat and they choose to interact anytime or anywhere. They could have been in the pub, they could have been sitting on the sofa watching a movie, and it was their choice whether they wanted to interact with me or not at that time, but they chose to.
And you were okay with that, 10 o'clock on a Saturday night?
I've got a sad social life. I don't tend to communicate with students at that hour. It was literally just the first message that I sent out, and I think that is one thing that is important if you're using social media with your students, is to set boundaries. For me, because my students are in 9 till 5 every day, if I said to them, I'm only going to communicate with you between the hours of 9 and 5, that wouldn't be much use to them. So I do communicate with them out with office hours, but I do that on my terms. They know when I'm available because I pop up on their Snapchat.
Okay, but you would say, oh, right, I'm not available after 10:30 on
or whatever. I mean, I think depending on who you are, the way that you work, you could specify that. If you only wanted to be available between 8 and 9 once a week, then you could do that. It's up to you to set those. I think if you're managing expectations, that's the important point. Yeah.
Right. So that leads me on to my next questions. How is Snapchat, say, different from other forms of social media? I mean, I'm much more familiar with Twitter. How is it different from, or WhatsApp is another common one as well? Yeah. How is it different?
There's a main reason that I chose to use Snapchat over WhatsApp. If you are in a WhatsApp group with other people, those people need your mobile phone number in order to be part of the group. And as much as I love my students, I don't really want to give them my mobile phone number, and I don't necessarily want to have theirs either. So with Snapchat, you actually join with a snap code, and I'll just show you what that looks like.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, actually. Did you have to share your mobile number? So you don't actually, you don't.
No, not at all, and that's one of the beauties of it. So literally, I can put this snap code up on a projector, and the students can literally scan that with their phones, and then be added. Then I actively add them onto the Snapchat group.
Okay, all right. So
and I think not many of my students are on Twitter at all.
Yeah.
They're not very big Twitter users, so that wouldn't work for me. And I love Twitter, but my students aren't there. And if you can't force students to use a platform that they're not using.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I do know about it, don't the I don't know, you don't call them tweets, but don't the messages, they disappear after, is it 24 hours? Is that the other
Well,
thing?
those are, so we call them snaps.
Snaps, okay. Right.
So if you're just sending a message through Snapchat on the normal platform, the messages are deleted within 10 seconds. You can specify how long it stays there for. Okay. And that has led to inappropriate use of Snapchat. Snapchat's got a bit of a bad reputation for that reason, because young people were sending pictures that they shouldn't of parts of their anatomy to each other. So Snapchat's got a bit of a bad reputation for that. With regards to what you said about messages disappearing after 24 hours, that's within the chat feature, but that only happens if you don't press on the message. If you press on the message within the chat function within the group, then the message is retained indefinitely.
Okay, so in that previous example you were talking about, so if you sent out a picture or say it was an X-ray of somebody's spine, and the students responded to it, but they could actually they could save that message.
Very much so, yeah. And I get notification if they've taken a screenshot. I get notification of that, and I actively encourage them to do that, because then they can file those messages. Otherwise, they've got the scroll of death looking back over information.
Oh, right, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So, generally speaking, and I guess it's come from the students, but what's your students' reaction been since you've started using it in the course?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first year I started using it with were my third year students. They were quite a small class. There was 21 of them, and that's a whole year group, so we were quite a relatively small number of students in our year groups. My second year students this year were 37 or 38 of them. And one of the downsides of using Snapchat as a group tutorial session is that you can only have a maximum of 32 people in your group.
Okay.
So the first year group that I used it with, it wasn't a problem. The second year group, there was an issue, so I had to have two groups, and I cross-posted to both of those groups.
Okay.
So they weren't missing out. But the reaction I've got from the students is, I think, I guess it's highlighted in the level of interaction and communication that I have with the students. They're very active in using Snapchat to communicate with me, but also with each other as well. If they ask a question and I'm not there at that moment to answer it, they'll help each other out, which is brilliant. But I can go back and look over the messages and make sure they're on the right track, and if they're not, then I can pick up on that. But the students report back that they feel it's a much less formal way to communicate, and they feel much more at ease communicating in that way. They say that they struggle, they spend a lot of time thinking about how to compose an email to send to a teaching fellow or a lecturer, whereas Snapchat, the communication just seems to happen a lot more easily to them.
Okay, so that sounds good for your students, and you sound very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
As words got out about what you're doing,
yeah.
your colleagues, have you had any sort of reaction from your colleagues, or even from the university that you work for? Because they must be not concerned, but has anybody expressed any any questions to you about your use of it? Because it is, as you say, it's quite an informal way of communicating.
And what I would say about yes, it is an informal way of communicating, but I think you need to set down ground rules. The students that I've communicated with, and I've used it for I think maybe at least 2 years now, I've never had any inappropriate communication or even any messages. The only message that's ever been sent to me in error was a student who was in ASDA, and there was a special deal on shampoo. She got very excited about it and sent a picture with a message saying, "This is not a drill, this is not a drill." And that's the only message that's come that really wasn't meant for the group. But I think you just have to set down boundaries and ground rules, and the students have been great at respecting that.
Okay.
With regards to what my colleagues think, they roll their eyes on a regular basis about what I'm doing in general. But if they want a message out there, they'll say to me, "Oh, Suzanne, can you get a message out to the students on Snapchat?" Because they know I can access the students in this way. So although my colleagues perhaps might not be interested in using Snapchat themselves, they know that it's an effective way to communicate with the students.
Okay.
And they'll ask me to get messages out. And with regards to the university, I was quite surprised that, so the associate principal of the University of Strathclyde actually contacted me and wanted me to present at the University Learning and Teaching Day of my use of Snapchat as a tutorial tool. So I thought it was quite a positive aspect from the University of Strathclyde, because she follows me on Twitter. This is Dr. Sarah Carter, and she was aware of what I was doing and felt that it was worthy of a presentation at the University Learning and Teaching Day.
Okay, that's interesting.
But there are definitely concerns as well with regards to communication taking place out with the normal university perhaps protocol. But what I would say is that these messages are retained. I make sure that the messages, there's a trail of messages. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In addition to saving the messages, I know it's got some other. You've used it in other ways as well. So you use the I forget what it's called, the bit icon, the bit picture.
Bitmojis.
Bitmoji. Sorry. Yeah. You use that, and when we spoke before, you said that was really important.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things. Can you maybe just say why you think that's important? I don't quite get that. And then why can't you just use a normal picture of yourself? And then secondly, I know you've also integrated Padlet into it as well.
That's right, yeah.
So those are a couple of developments that sound interesting as well. Could you just say something about why you've used those?
So a Bitmoji essentially is an avatar that you create, and the amount of detail you can get into is quite extraordinary. With regards to eye shape, eye colour, face shape, hairstyle, outfit, absolutely everything.
Have you got one on your phone there?
Yeah, I'll try.
Right.
Just give me a second and I'll find.
Okay. I mean,
So that's my. Sorry, I'll do it.
Oh yeah.
That's my Bitmoji.
Yeah, that's very similar to you. Yeah.
But a lot more better looking than me. But the Bitmoji, there literally is a Bitmoji for everything. For example, if the students have done something particularly good, I can say well done. If I've asked a question and there's not been much interaction, there's a Bitmoji where I can say where are you. And also you can create a Bitmoji if you're communicating with the students and they have a Bitmoji as well. You can have Bitmojis that join up together where you both appear on a Bitmoji together. But the students react.
So the students have their own as well then?
Yeah. So when the students, it's brilliant. You can also Bitmoji. You can use it. Well, you've seen me use it on Twitter. I use it quite a lot on Twitter. But you can use it on WhatsApp. You can use it on Facebook. You can, and actually, I've discovered recently you can use it on desktop as well.
Okay.
So you can use it in communication with students. But I guess it's a fun, informal way to communicate with the students that can give them motivation before their exams. I send them out a Bitmoji wishing them good luck, and afterwards, and also positive messages like "I believe in you, you got this, you can do it."
Okay.
And they really appreciate the use of the Bitmojis, and so do I. I'm slightly addicted to using them.
Right, so I can understand that. What the other thing was Padlet as well, which I am more familiar with, which is a great tool. So I presume that's more related to the content of your teaching, is it?
Very much so. So basically, from experience, when we do a lot of practical sessions, so and one of the many practical sessions is based on patient assessment. So typically what we do is we will display or show students particular patient assessment techniques, which then they will carry out on patients when they come in for the practical sessions. But what we found is that students are spending time during these demonstrations taking notes and essentially missing the demonstration. So last year I said to them, how would you feel if I took lots of short videos of these patient assessment techniques and labelled them and put them on Padlet? So for anyone who hasn't used Padlet, I would describe it as an electronic whiteboard that you can stick things on. So for me, I was attaching all of these videos to the Padlet, and then I uploaded that Padlet to Snapchat, so I embedded it within the chat, and the students got lots of very positive feedback from the students from the course evaluation forms, specifically about using Padlet in that way, because they felt they could look over these videos afterwards, and certainly myself and my colleague Chris observed that they were much more proficient at patient assessment when they came to their practical sessions, because they could see them, they could refer to these videos highlighting how these tests are done properly. They could try them out on family friends at home before then doing it, conducting these assessments on patients in the classroom. So that was I guess a slightly innovative use of Snapchat, embedding Padlet within that, but the students really appreciated that.
Okay, which leads me on to my next question. You mentioned it's an innovative use. You're using, Padlet, you're using these Bitmojis, the Snapchat is all quite innovative, and for many lecturers it might seem, if you're going to start innovating, you're going to, along the way, with any innovation or anything you do new, it's going to lead to probably mistakes. Things do happen that don't always run smoothly because you've never used them before. It's very difficult in a world, high HE now. We're basically, we've got student surveys, we're being assessed at the end of, and we're all constantly having to jump through these hoops. I mean, in England, we've got TEF and REF and things like that. It makes it hard to do these innovative things. Is it still worth doing even though you make the mistakes?
I would argue it's even more important, given the environment that we're in, to be innovative and try these new things. And students actually really appreciate it. And I think if you make mistakes, the students appreciate the fact that you're trying something new. So my argument would be, you can't afford not to to be innovative and try these things, and don't underestimate how forgiving students can be. They appreciate you making the effort to do something different.
Yeah.
And one of my practical classes on gait analysis, I get the students to paint the soles of their feet and get them to walk up and down on paper, just doing things in a different way to help them remember it. And I think that's really important. We just need to give students a bit of variety, I think, in the way that we're teaching.
That's true. I think I agree with that. Okay, last question really is, if somebody who's just watched this, listened to what you've just said, and they're interested in using Snapchat, what would be your one bit of advice you would give to them? In
an HE setting, I would say your students are your biggest, can be your biggest allies and help in this situation. They're very proficient in using Snapchat, so talk to your students. And I guess as well, find out where your students are. If they're not using Snapchat, there's no point in using Snapchat. So I guess the first question would be, where are you and where do you want me to communicate with you? And then the students were very proactive in the early stages of me using Snapchat, and I think that certainly helped.
Okay.
Yeah. And just try it, don't be afraid.
Okay. All right, that's it really. That's my questions. Unless you've got anything else you want to say.
There's one more thing I'd like to say about when you do post images on Snapchat, to take them from your camera roll. Sometimes what was happening was students were taking pictures within the app, and if you do that, you can only look at the picture once or twice before you can't access it anymore. So if students are want some feedback on perhaps a particular slide, I get them to take a picture from their camera roll and embed that in the Snapchat, and that way it's there indefinitely for everybody else to see.
Okay, thank you. Top tip. All right, thanks. Okay, that's it. Thank you for taking time and chatting to me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers.
Okay, see you later. Bye.